At my brother Nathan's lavish 37th birthday gala, my family ambushed me before a crowd of San Francisco's elite, demanding I surrender my $10 million 0 cents penthouse to my jobless brother so he could claim his place. When I stood firm, my mother hurled a spiked champagne glass at me, its shards cutting my arm as the room stood silent. That night, as a chilling threat flickered across my phone, I vowed to protect my empire at all costs. At my brother Nathan's lavish 37th birthday gala, my family ambushed me before a crowd of San Francisco's elite, demanding I surrender my $10 million 0 cents penthouse to my jobless brother so he could claim his place. When I stood firm, my mother hurled a spiked champagne glass at me, its shards cutting my arm as the room stood silent. That night, as a chilling threat flickered across my phone, I vowed to protect my empire at all costs. The chandelier above me glittered like a constellation trapped in glass, its light fracturing across the rooftop ballroom of the Fairmont Hotel. San Francisco sprawled below, a mosaic of ambition and fog, its skyline a testament to dreamers like me who clawed their way to the top. I stood at the edge of the gala, my champagne flute cold against my palm, watching 200 of my brother Nathan's guests swirl in their tailored suits and sequined gowns. At 34, I, Alina Harper, CEO of Nexus Innovations, was no stranger to high-stakes rooms. My AI startup, valued at $2 billion 0 cents, had reshaped healthcare, landed me on Forbes' cover, and bought me a $10 million 0 cents penthouse in the Millennium Tower. But tonight wasn't about me. It was Nathan's 37th birthday, and the air crackled with something darker than celebration, a trap I hadn't yet seen coming. Trap. I adjusted the strap of my emerald green gown, its silk hugging my frame like armor. The room buzzed with Silicon Valley elite, family, friends, and distant relatives, all gathered to fawn over Nathan, the charming drifter who'd never held a job longer than a season. My parents, Margaret and Richard Harper, stood at the center, beaming as Nathan worked the crowd with his easy grin. To them, he was the sun. I was just a satellite orbiting in his shadow, despite building an empire from nothing, and the familiar ache of childhood resentment stirred. But I pushed it down. Tonight, I'd play my part. The dutiful sister, the successful daughter who showed up with a $5,000 0 cents watch wrapped in silver paper, hoping foolishly that it might bridge the chasm between us. The band struck up a jazz cover of a Sinatra classic, and I scanned the room for Sophia, my best friend and a venture capitalist who'd seen me through every boardroom battle. She was late, her text promising she'd arrive before the speeches. I needed her sharp eyes tonight. Something felt off. Maybe it was the way my mother's gaze darted to me, then away, or how Nathan's laugh carried an edge, like a blade hidden in velvet. Or maybe it was the locked briefcase I'd glimpsed in his old bedroom last week, tucked under his childhood bed in our parents' Oakland home. What was in it? Why did he guard it like a secret worth more than his failed crypto scams? I sipped my champagne, the bubbles sharp on my tongue, and tried to shake the unease. Growing up, I'd learned to navigate my family's lopsided love. In our modest Oakland suburb, Nathan was the adored firstborn, his vandalism shrugged off as youthful spirit, while my straight-A report cards earned a curt, "keep it up." At 10, I taught myself coding, my fingers dancing over a second-hand PC to build my first app. I won a national hackathon, but my parents skipped the ceremony for Nathan's soccer game where he spent most of it on the bench. By high school, I led our robotics team to a state championship, but they were at Nathan's failed band performance, clapping for his off-key guitar solo. The pattern was set early. Nathan could do no wrong, and I could do no right. At 16, I faced a moment that should have changed everything. Biking home from a coding boot camp, tires humming against the cracked pavement, I took a shortcut through a rough part of town. Headlights flared behind me too close, and a rusted sedan swerved to block my path. 3 men spilled out, their laughter jagged, one flashing a knife. My heart slammed against my ribs as I pedaled hard. Weaving through an alley, their shouts fading only when I reached a gas station's fluorescent safety. I never told my parents. They'd have blamed me for being careless, too busy excusing Nathan's latest troubles, spray painting a neighbor's fence, to care. That night, I learned to rely on myself, a lesson that carried me through Stanford, where I juggled scholarships, 3 jobs, barista, tutor, freelance coder, and a mountain of loans while they paid for Nathan's 3 college dropouts. "Elena!" My mother's voice cut through the gala's hum, her smile tight as she waved me over. Margaret Harper, with her perfectly styled auburn hair and pearl necklace, looked every inch the proud matriarch, but I knew that smile. It was the one she used when she wanted something. I crossed the room, my heels clicking on the marble floor, aware of eyes following me. In San Francisco's tech world, I was a titan, but here, I was just the daughter who dared to outshine her brother. "Sweetheart, you're late to the family toast," she said, her tone sweet but laced with reproach. "Nathan's been asking for you." "I've been here all night," I replied, keeping my voice even, "just mingling." She looped her arm through mine, guiding me toward the stage, where Nathan stood with my father, Richard, a retired accountant whose stern face softened only for his son. Nathan's suit was new, probably bought with another loan from my parents, who never questioned his failures. He'd flunked out of UCLA, then Colorado State, then some private college in Arizona, each time coddled with excuses about rigid academic systems. Meanwhile, I'd clawed my way through Stanford, sleeping 4 hours a night to balance shifts at a coffee shop with debugging code for startups. They hadn't attended my graduation. Nathan had a crisis with a landlord, but I'd built Nexus Innovations by 28, revolutionizing AI-driven healthcare. Forbes called me a visionary. My parents called me busy. "Everyone, please." My father's voice boomed through the microphone, silencing the crowd. He stood tall, his gray hair catching the light, Nathan at his side like a prince awaiting coronation. "We're here to celebrate our son Nathan, a man with a heart bigger than this city." The room erupted in applause, and I clapped along, my smile practiced. Nathan basked in it, his charm a polished weapon. He'd always been good at this, winning people over, making them believe his next big plan would work. Crypto scams, influencer gigs, a consulting firm that existed only on Instagram. He'd burned through my parents' savings, each failure met with their sympathy. Last month he'd been fired from a cushy PR job for pocketing petty cash, but to them it was office politics. I wondered, not for the first time, what game he was playing tonight. As the applause faded, my father's eyes found mine, and a chill slithered down my spine. "But tonight isn't just about Nathan," he said, his voice carrying a weight that made my stomach twist. "It's about family. And family means sacrifice." The room stilled, 200 pairs of eyes swiveling to me. My mother's grip on my arm tightened, her nails digging into my skin. Nathan stepped forward, his grin sharp, and I realized too late that I'd walked into a trap. Sophia still wasn't here, and my phone, tucked in my clutch, was out of reach. The air thickened, heavy with expectation, and I felt like I was 16 again, cornered in that alley with nowhere to run. "Elena," my father continued, his tone deceptively warm, "you've done well for yourself. That penthouse of yours, that tower in the sky, it's a symbol of what hard work can do. But Nathan, our Nathan, he's hit some rough patches. A man needs a place to call his own, a space to rebuild. and we as a family have a solution." My heart pounded, a drumbeat drowning out the murmurs around me. I knew what was coming, had sensed it in the pointed comments at family dinners, the way my mother called my penthouse extravagant while Nathan rifled through my office uninvited. 2 years ago, I'd bought that $10 million, 0 cents, glass-walled sanctuary in the Millennium Tower. Its views of the Golden Gate Bridge a daily reminder of what I'd overcome. It wasn't just a home. It was my proof, my fortress, built without a dime from my parents, who'd poured everything into Nathan's failures, and now they wanted to take it. "We think," my mother said, stepping to the microphone, her voice dripping with rehearsed sincerity, "that Nathan should move into Elena's penthouse. Just temporarily, of course, until he finds his footing. It's what families do, share their blessings." The room gasped, then buzzed, whispers rippling like wildfire. I stood frozen, my champagne flute trembling in my hand. They weren't asking. They were demanding, in front of San Francisco's elite, my investors, my board, my rivals. My Aunt Clara, her lips pursed, nodded approvingly. My cousin Mark, a failed realtor, clapped Nathan on the back. Even my Uncle Ted, who'd once called my success lucky, chimed in from the crowd. "It's a perfect fit, Elena. You're barely home with all your work." Nathan took the microphone, his eyes locking onto mine, a predator sizing up prey. "I've always admired my little sister's hustle," he said, his voice smooth as whiskey. "That penthouse, it's a status symbol, right? A place like that could open doors for me, help me network, land the kind of deals I'm meant for. I'd take good care of it, Elena. You wouldn't even notice me there." The gall of it stole my breath. He'd known about this ambush, planned it with my parents, banking on public pressure to break me. I thought of the late-night walk last month, when a masked figure had followed me near my tower, whispering my name before vanishing as security approached. Was that Nathan's doing? A scare tactic to soften me up, or something else? Tied to the cryptic late-night calls I'd overheard my mother making at our last family brunch, her voice low and urgent, to an unknown contact? "No," I said, my voice cutting through the room like a blade. The word echoed, raw and final, and the crowd hushed. "My penthouse is my home, earned with years of sacrifice. It's not a crash pad for someone who can't hold a job." The silence was deafening, then shattered by my mother's gasp. "Elena," she hissed, her face flushing crimson, "how dare you speak to your brother like that after everything we've done for you?" Everything? The word was a slap, rewriting history. They'd done nothing. Nothing for my education, my career, my survival. I'd worked 80-hour weeks at my first startup, outmaneuvering a hostile boardroom takeover at 23 that nearly tanked my vision. I'd faced a high-stakes lawsuit last year from a rival company, testifying under media glare to save Nexus IPO. I'd built this life alone, while they bankrolled Nathan's scams and excused his embezzlement, and now they stood here, rewriting my struggle as privilege. "Everything?" I repeated, my voice steady but burning. "I paid for Stanford with 3 jobs, while you funded Nathan's 3 dropouts. I built Nexus from a laptop in a studio apartment, while you paid his rent. My penthouse isn't yours to give away." The crowd shifted, some whispering, others staring. My father's face darkened, but it was Nathan who stepped closer, his smile gone. "So that's it, huh? Your fancy tower means more than your own brother? Nice to know where your priorities are, sis." "Priorities?" I shot back. "My priority is protecting what I've earned. I've given you thousands already. Rent, debts, your car. But my home? That's a line you don't cross." My mother moved before I could react, her hand arcing through the air. The slap landed hard, a crack that split the room, my cheek stinging as the champagne flute slipped from my hand, shattering on the marble. "Ungrateful!" she screamed, her eyes wild. "You'd let your brother suffer to keep your selfish palace?" Blood roared in my ears, my vision blurring with shock and pain. I touched my cheek, fingers coming away wet with a trickle of blood where her ring had caught my skin. The crowd stood frozen, 200 faces, investors, colleagues, strangers, watching in horrified silence. My Aunt Clara looked away, uncomfortable but unmoving. My cousin Mark smirked, as if I'd earned it. My father's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, his silence a betrayal louder than words. Nathan crossed his arms, a faint smirk playing on his lips, as if he'd won. In that moment I saw them clearly, my family, not as kin but as a machine, grinding down anyone who dared rise above their script. I'd spent my life chasing their approval, but this wasn't love. It was control, dressed up as duty. I straightened, my cheek burning, and met my mother's glare. "You just assaulted me," I said, my voice low but carrying, "in front of everyone, and no one stopped you." I turned, my heels echoing as I walked toward the exit, the crowd parting like a sea. Whispers followed me, but I didn't care. My clutch buzzed with a text. "Sophia, finally here, stuck in traffic." I'd call her from the car. As I reached the glass doors, my phone pinged again. Not Sophia, but an unknown number. The message was simple, chilling. "Give him the penthouse, or you'll lose more than your pride." I froze, my breath catching. The ballroom's lights glittered behind me, but the city beyond felt like a jungle, full of unseen predators. Was this Nathan's doing? Escalating his game? Or something deeper, tied to that locked briefcase, those secret calls, the figure who'd stalked me in the dark? I stepped into the elevator, the doors closing with a soft thud, and made a decision. I wasn't the scared girl in that Oakland alley anymore. I'd built an empire, and I'd fight to keep it, whatever it took. The ride to my penthouse was a blur, the city's lights streaking past like comets. My cheek throbbed, but the pain was secondary to the fire in my chest. I'd given Nathan too much already. Money, time, pieces of my peace. No more. As I entered my tower, the security guard, Carlos, nodded, his eyes lingering on my face. "You okay, Ms. Harper?" he asked, voice gentle. "Family drama," I said, forcing a smile. "I'll be fine." But I wasn't fine. Upstairs in the glass-walled sanctuary I'd earned, I locked the door and sank onto the leather sofa, the Bay Bridge glowing beyond. My phone buzzed again. Another unknown number, this time a photo. My penthouse's balcony, taken from inside with a single word. Soon. Someone had been here, in my home. My fortress wasn't safe. I called Sophia, my voice shaking as I recounted the gala, the slap, the threats. "They're not your family, Elena," she said, her voice fierce. "They're vultures. You need security, a lawyer, a therapist, now." She was right, but as I hung up, the weight of it all crashed down. I'd faced down boardrooms, lawsuits, even that carjacking at 16, but this was different. This was betrayal, raw and personal, from the people who were supposed to love me. I opened my laptop, pulling up Nexus security protocols, and started typing. If my family wanted a war, they'd get one. But first, I needed answers. What was in Nathan's briefcase? Who was my mother calling in the dead of night? And who was watching me, waiting for me to break? The city glittered below, indifferent to my fight. I stood, my reflection sharp in the glass, and made a vow. They could try to take my penthouse, my empire, my peace. But I was Elena Harper, and I didn't break. Not then, not now, not The city's pulse thrummed against the glass walls of my Millennium Tower penthouse, a fortress that no longer felt like mine. It was 2 a.m. hours after the gala where my mother's hand had struck my face, her ring slicing my cheek, and my family had stood by, complicit in their silence. The sting of betrayal burned deeper than the wound, but it was the encrypted email waiting in my inbox that kept me awake. A grainy live feed of my own living room, my silhouette reflected in the window, and a single line of text. "You can't lock us out forever." Someone had breached my sanctuary, planted a camera in the heart of my empire, and now they were watching me. I stood frozen, my laptop's glow casting shadows across the marble floor. At 34, I, Elena Harper, CEO of Nexus Innovations, had faced down boardroom coups, rival lawsuits, and even a carjacking at 16 that left me trembling in an Oakland gas station. But this was different. This was personal. A violation that clawed at the roots of who I was. My $10 million 0-cents penthouse, with its panoramic views of the Golden Gate Bridge, wasn't just a home. It was the tangible proof of my climb from a neglected childhood to a $2 billion 0-cents AI empire. And now, my family, my own blood, wanted to tear it down. I grabbed my phone, hands shaking, and called Sophia, my best friend and the only person who'd seen through my family's facade from the start. "They're inside my head," I said when she answered, my voice raw. "There's a camera, Sophia, in my penthouse. They're watching me." "Jesus, Elena," she said, her voice sharp with alarm. "Pack a bag, I'm coming to get you. You're not staying there tonight." "No," I said, glancing at the live feed still open on my screen. "If I run, they win. I need to fight this on my terms. Elena, this isn't just your family being jerks. This is stalking, maybe worse. You need security, a lawyer, and a damn therapist. Now," she was right, but the fire in my chest wouldn't let me back down. I thought of Nathan's smirk at the gala, the way he'd orchestrated that public ambush, demanding I hand over my penthouse so he could live like a CEO. My mother's voice, accusing me of hoarding success, echoed in my ears, joined by my father's silence and the approving nods of aunts and cousins. And then there was that cryptic note I'd glimpsed in my mother's purse last month at a family brunch, scrawled in her elegant handwriting, "Elena's empire must fall." Was this their plan all along? Not just to take my home, but to dismantle everything I'd built? I closed the laptop, the feed vanishing, and paced the living room, my bare feet cold against the floor. The city glittered beyond, San Francisco's skyline a constellation of ambition, but it felt like a cage now, every shadow hiding a threat. I thought of the brake failure on that winding coastal road last week, my Tesla veering toward a cliff until I yanked the wheel, heart pounding. The mechanic had confirmed tampering. Someone had cut the lines, but the police found no leads. Was it Nathan, desperate to scare me into compliance? Or someone else, tied to the locked briefcase in his childhood bedroom, the one he guarded like a secret worth killing for? I poured a glass of bourbon, the amber liquid catching the light, and forced myself to think like the CEO I was. Nexus Innovations had survived a hostile takeover attempt when I was 23, when I outmaneuvered investors twice my age to save my first startup. Last year, I'd faced a rival's lawsuit that threatened our IPO, testifying under a media storm to protect my vision. I could handle this, but first I needed answers. Who was behind the camera? What was my mother planning with those late-night calls I'd overheard, her voice hushed and urgent to an unknown contact? And why had Nathan's latest firing for embezzling petty cash from a PR firm felt like a spark in a powder keg? By dawn, I'd made a plan. I called Carlos, my building's security chief, and instructed him to sweep the penthouse for bugs and cameras. I texted Claire, my lawyer, to prepare cease and desist letters for my family with restraining orders on standby. And I booked an emergency session with Dr. Lauren, a therapist I'd seen briefly after a boardroom crisis, to help me untangle the emotional minefield of my family's betrayal. But before I could act, my phone buzzed with a new message from an unknown number, a photo of my office desk taken from inside, with a post-it note in Nathan's handwriting. "You owe me." My blood ran cold. He'd been here, or someone working for him had. The game was escalating, and I was running out of time. The morning sun burned through the fog as I drove to Nexus headquarters in Soma, the city's tech heart. My cheek, bandaged from my mother's ring, drew stares from my team, but I waved off their concern. "Rough night?" I said, forcing a smile. In my corner office, I locked the door and called Sophia, who'd insisted on meeting me here. She arrived in a whirlwind of Chanel and fury, her dark hair pulled into a tight bun, her eyes scanning me like a general assessing a soldier. "You look like hell," she said, setting her coffee on my desk. "Tell me everything." I recounted the gala, my father's family proposal to let Nathan move into my penthouse, my mother's spiked champagne glass shattering against my arm, the crowd's silence as blood trickled down my sleeve. I showed her the email with the live feed, the photo of my desk, the threatening texts. Her face hardened with each detail. But when I mentioned the balcony railing at the Marin County estate, how it had given way as I leaned against it, only Sophia's quick grab saving me from a 20-foot fall, she stood pacing. "This isn't just entitlement, Elena," she said. "This is sabotage. Your family's not just after your penthouse. They want to break you. Nathan's a leech, but Margaret, she's the mastermind. That note in her purse, Elena's empire must fall. She's not playing mom, she's playing chess." I nodded, my throat tight. Sophia had always seen my family clearly, calling their favoritism toxic when I was still making excuses. Growing up, Nathan was the star. His vandalism laughed off as boys being boys, while my hackathon wins at 10 were ignored for his soccer games. At 16, when I escaped that carjacking, I hid it to avoid their dismissal. At Stanford, I worked 3 jobs while they funded Nathan's college flops. Even my rise to CEO, building Nexus from a dorm room dream to a healthcare revolution, earned no praise, just my mother's critique of my extravagant penthouse and Nathan's drunken pitch to my board at a crashed investor gala. "I've given them too much already," I said, my voice low. $5,000 last month for Nathan's rent and debts, and they still want more. I'm done." "You're not done," Sophia said, leaning forward. "You're starting, but you need to move fast. They're not stopping at guilt trips. That brake tempering, the balcony, the camera, someone's willing to hurt you. Cut them off before they ruin your empire." Her words landed like a punch, but before I could respond, my assistant Priya knocked urgently. "Elena, we've got a problem. The servers, someone's breached them. Sensitive data's leaking and the board's freaking out." My stomach dropped. "A cyber attack? Now?" I pulled up my laptop, fingers flying as I accessed Nexus's security dashboard. The breach was real. Patient data from our AI trials, critical to our upcoming IPO, was streaming to an offshore server. This wasn't a random hack. It was targeted, timed to hit me when I was weakest. I glanced at Sophia, her eyes wide. "You think this is them?" she whispered. "I don't know," I said, already dialing our cybersecurity chief, Raj. "But I'm finding out." The next 3 hours were a blur of crisis management. Raj traced the breach to a phishing email sent to an intern, but the sophistication suggested an inside job. The board demanded an emergency meeting, their emails piling up with accusations of negligence. As I coordinated with Raj to lock down the servers, my phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. "Heard about your little data problem. Tough break, sis. Need a place to crash while you sort it out?" The smirk in his words was palpable, and I wondered if he was gloating or something more sinister. Was he behind the hack, or was he just a pawn in a larger game? By noon, the breach was contained, but the damage was done. Headlines screamed about Nexus's security failure, and our stock dipped 8%. The board meeting loomed like a guillotine, and I knew I'd face questions I couldn't answer. Not yet. As I prepared my defense, Claire called, her voice brisk. "I've drafted the cease and desist letters for your family," she said. "The law firm?" "Some shady outfit in Oakland." "Sent a letter claiming you made a verbal contract to house Nathan. It's nonsense, but it's aggressive. They're trying to scare you." "Let them try," I said, my jaw tight. "Send the letters. And Claire?" "Look into Nathan's finances. I want to know who's funding his schemes." "On it," she said. "Stay safe, Elena. This feels bigger than family drama." Her words echoed Sophia's warning, and as I hung up, I felt the walls closing in. My family's ambush at the gala wasn't a one-off. It was a campaign orchestrated with chilling precision. I thought of the hidden camera in my office, discovered by Carlos's sweep this morning. A tiny device tucked inside a smoke detector, its lens trained on my desk. Who planted it? Nathan, who'd been fired for theft and had the motive, my mother, whose note hinted at a vendetta, or someone else? A shadowy figure tied to the death threat I'd received last night? An encrypted email with a live feed of my penthouse and the words, "You're not untouchable." I met Dr. Lauren at her downtown office that afternoon, my bandage itching under my blazer. Her warm eyes softened as I recounted the gala, the threats, the breach. "Your family's behavior is textbook narcissistic abuse," she said, her voice steady. "Nathan's the golden child, propped up to keep the system intact. You're the scapegoat, punished for breaking free. That slap, the camera, the brake tampering, it's not just about the penthouse. It's about control." "Control," I repeated, the word heavy. "But why now? Why escalate to this?" "Because you're a threat," she said. "Your success exposes their failures. Nathan's 37, living off your parents, while you're a CEO. They need to pull you down to keep their narrative alive." Her words clicked, like a key turning in a lock. I thought of my cousin Emily, a journalist who'd texted me this morning, apologizing for her silence at the gala. "Your mom's done this before," she'd written. "She turned the family against my dad when he started his business. Be careful." Emily's warning, paired with Dr. Lauren's diagnosis, painted a picture of a family not just dysfunctional, but dangerous, willing to destroy me to protect their delusion. Back at Nexus, the board meeting was a bloodbath. A shareholder, Victor Klein, a silver-haired investor with ties to my father's old accounting firm, led the charge. "This breach is unacceptable," he thundered, his eyes glinting. "Perhaps Ms. Harper's distracted by personal matters. We need leadership we can trust." The accusation stung, but I held my ground, presenting Raja's report and a recovery plan. "The breach is contained," I said, my voice steel. "We're investigating the source, and I'm fully committed to Nexus." The board voted to keep me, but Victor's smirk as he left told me he wasn't done. Was he the family-linked investor Sophia had warned about, or just an opportunist smelling blood? That night I returned to my penthouse, now fortified with biometric locks and surveillance drones Carlos had installed. But safety was an illusion. As I poured another bourbon, my phone lit up with a viral post from Nathan. "Some people forget their roots when they get a taste of power. Sad when your own sister chooses a penthouse over family. Ungrateful? Nexus fail." The comments were a flood of vitriol, relatives, family, friends, even strangers piling on. My Aunt Clara wrote, "Elena's always been selfish. My cousin Mark added, "Nathan deserves better." The public shaming was a calculated move, designed to break me through humiliation. I was about to block him when a new email arrived, this time with a video. Me, sleeping in my bed last night, filmed from above. The message read, "Next time, you won't wake up." My hands trembled as I forwarded it to Carlos and Claire, my pulse racing. This wasn't Nathan's style. He was too sloppy for this level of tech. Someone else was pulling the strings, someone with resources and a grudge. I thought of the shadowy figure Sophia had mentioned, a rumor of a Nexus rival funding Nathan's smears. Was this their work, or was my mother's note, "Elena's empire must fall," the key to it all? The next morning, I woke to chaos. A whistleblower, anonymous but suspiciously well-informed, had leaked to TechCrunch, accusing me of ethics violations, falsified AI trial data, a lie that could tank Nexus IPO. The timing was no coincidence. Coming hours after Nathan's post and the death threat, Claire traced the whistleblower's IP to a cafe near my parents' Marin County estate, raising the chilling possibility of a family ally. As I fielded frantic calls from my board, Nathan tried to bribe my concierge, offering $500, 0 cents to let him move in. Carlos turned him away, but the audacity was a warning. They weren't stopping. I compiled a dossier that day, a weapon against their gaslighting. On one side, my journey, Stanford loans, 80-hour weeks, Nexus rise. On the other, Nathan's failures, 3 colleges, countless jobs, my parents' endless bailouts. It was a shield, proof that I'd earned every inch of my empire. But as I worked, a new threat emerged. Carlos called, his voice tense. "Ms. Harper, someone tried to access your private elevator last night. The biometrics stopped them, but they left this." He sent a photo of a knife, its blade etched with my initials, stabbed into the elevator door. Fear gave way to fury. I wasn't the scared girl who'd fled that carjacking, nor the sister who'd sent Nathan $5,000 0 cents to appease my mother's guilt trips. I arranged a showdown, booking a secure suite at the St. Regis Hotel for tomorrow. I'd face my family, Margaret, Richard, Nathan, and lay down my terms. No money, no penthouse, no abuse. If they refused, I'd cut them off, no matter the cost. The meeting was a storm. My mother screamed, tears streaming, accusing me of betrayal. "You're tearing this family apart," she wailed, clutching Nathan's arm. Nathan leaned forward, his eyes cold. "I've got dirt on you, Elena," he said. "Keep this up, and the world knows what Nexus is hiding." My father, ever the peacemaker, pleaded for unity, but his words rang hollow. I slid my dossier across the table, my voice steady. "This is the truth," I said. "My life, my work, my boundaries. Respect them, or we're done." Nathan laughed, a bitter sound. "You think you're untouchable? You're not." My mother's face twisted, and for a moment I saw the woman who'd written that note, her ambition to destroy me laid bare. I stood, my terms non-negotiable, and walked out, their shouts fading behind me. In the weeks that followed, the threats stopped. Claire's cease and desist letters, backed by restraining orders, silenced Nathan's smears. The whistleblower story fizzled when Raj proved the data was clean. Nexus's IPO soared, and I thrived, surrounded by Sophia, Emily, and a chosen family who celebrated my strength. But the questions lingered. Who was the shadowy figure behind Nathan's campaign? What was in that briefcase, and what did my mother's note mean? Standing on my penthouse balcony, the city alive below, I felt a peace I'd never known. I'd faced my family's darkness and emerged whole, my empire intact. They'd tried to break me, but I was Elena Harper. Unbreakable, unstoppable, and finally free.